The one chance politicians get to speak directly to the viewer without being drawn into a conversation about just how big an arsehole they are comes in the form of the party political broadcast.
Trouble is, as soon as they start making adverts for themselves, they quickly prove they're not the best or most subtle programme makers. Here, for instance, we see Labour gently trying to create a link in the voters' mind between Tory-approved nuclear missiles and soft pink, easily burnt-to-death babies.
If there's another world war, it'll be nuclear. There'll be no winners, and no one will survive.
It will never happen.
But sod nuclear war, the Tories brought us something even more frightening, the nuclear winter of '79.
Do you remember what it was like before the last election? The rubbish piled high in the streets.
Yes, oh, it really stank.
Ambulances left unmanned. The dead unburied.
Yeah, well, they weren't going anywhere.
Cancer patients sent home from hospital.
Shit, they've nicked an unmanned ambulance. Bloody cancer patients. Oh.
And when archive footage won't suffice, they try and scare us with terrifying metaphorical visions of the future under the opposition.
Did you or did you not want better schooling for your children?
Guilty.
And on the few occasions they're not being all sledgehammer and art house, they still come across as arseholes. Without interviewers holding them to account, politicians can easily seem stuffy or complacent.
I think we can be fairly satisfied the way things have gone lately, don't you, Ram?
Yes, well, we've got through our programme very well, and I've just come from the House, and we're right up to date.
Or weird and creepy.
We believe in Britain. We're all in this together. Good luck to you all, and good night.
Or bolshy and needy.
Stand firm. Don't be swayed. Give us a chance.
Or young and sexy.
Neil Kinnock's greatest asset is his youth.
Or grey and boring. Or Scottish and boring and sitting at a desk.
Good evening. Good God, it's footage of Gordon Brown in the womb.
You'd be better off with Labour.
And when they're not telling you you're better off with Labour, they're telling you the economic situation is getting better more quickly than anybody thought this time last year.
There's no doubt that the economic situation is getting better, and it's getting better more quickly than anybody thought this time last year.
Even when politicians simply try and drum up support, they come across like a weird cult.
I just came to realise that if I believed in those principles and I supported what the Labour Party was doing, then I should really join up and play a part in trying to change things.
Yes, no matter how many zhuzhy modern TV techniques they employ to pass themselves off as normal people, politicians seem doomed to come across as snake oil salesmen or pricks. Maybe they could do with help from someone who really knows how TV works.
Somebody a bit like Simon Cowell.
Yes, entertainment deity Simon Cowell recently outlined his plan to redefine political TV in a revealing and ominous interview on the BBC's Heavyweight News Night.
You've said in the past that the X Factor could have other applications. What about some kind of political engagement for the X Factor?
Yeah, because it's the sort of thing I'd like to watch. There are so many really, really, really hot topics. And
like what?
Well, for instance, should we or should we be in Iraq and Afghanistan? If you actually asked most people in the country, why are we there? I couldn't even tell you.
I'd give Richard Madeley a ring if I were you. He's got a few theories.
Simon might like to know that an X Factor style political show has been tried before in the form of ITV's snazzy political bear pit Vote For Me, which had all the usual talent show ingredients: a shiny studio, a panel of expert judges, an eager amateur lineup and a phone vote, in which, to the channel's embarrassment, was won by extreme right-winger Rodney Hilton-Potts.
Thank you very much. Finally, candidate number one, Rodney, tell us one thing you care about. Your time starts now.
Our pensioners didn't fight 2 world wars to save this great country, to have it swamped with immigrants.
Vote For Me wasn't a hit, but then it didn't have a red telephone in the middle.
We would have a red telephone in the middle, which is at any time someone from number 10 can call in. But I think something like that would be a good way for me to get involved in politics in my own way, which is it would be controversial. The public would eventually make the decision.
You know, I dread to think what a controversial political X Factor in which the public gets to decide might look like.
He's the most divisive politician in Britain today. He denied climate change. He denied the existence of black Welshmen.
There's no such thing as a black Welshman.
He denied 6 million dead.
I'm not a racist, no.
It's it's time
That was a lynch mob.
to face Nick Griffin.
How did our faith in politicians droop so low? Here's a special film from documentary maker Adam Curtis, the man behind The Century of the Self, The Power of Nightmares, and It Felt Like a Kiss, on that very subject.
This is a film about how all of us have become Richard Nixon. Just like him, we have all become paranoid weirdos. It's the story of how television and newspapers did this to us, and how it has paralysed the ability of politics to transform the world for the better. Once upon a time, politicians believed they could change the world. One of them was a Labour MP called Roy Jenkins.
An attitude of conservatism would be very unbecoming to the Labour movement. We exist to change society.
In the 60s, Jenkins radically reformed Britain. He used his power as Home Secretary to help get rid of laws against homosexuality, abortion and divorce, and oversaw the end of the death penalty. The press and much of the public hated it, but he refused to bow down to the pressure because he was an elitist. He knew it was good for them. But then, Richard Nixon came to power in America. He saw himself as an outsider, and he hated elites. He was convinced that many in the East Coast establishment secretly ran America in their own interests. Snooty academics, liberal foundations, film stars, heads of big corporations, and even the CIA. In Nixon's mind, they were all part of a hidden, corrupt network. And what's more, they were out to destroy him. So Nixon set up a covert operation to bug and smear all these enemies. But in 1972, they got caught bugging the Democrats in the Watergate building. Nixon tried to cover it up, but he was exposed by the Washington Post. As a result of Watergate, investigative journalists in America and Britain became the heroes of the age. And in the 70s, they uncovered all sorts of bad people.
That's your words,
who often beat them up. But then, the journalists began to uncover the strangest thing. They found corruption in the heart of the elites who ran their country. Politicians and civil servants took bribes. The security services assassinated people illegally.
Right.
Policemen concocted evidence and sold drugs.
I'm here to look into the disturbing case of Mrs. Joyce Brown.
And even senior doctors covered up terrible mistakes. And as the journalists exposed all this, they began to sound like Richard Nixon. That there really were hidden conspiracies in the heart of the establishment. And then, in an even odder twist, the journalists found an unlikely ally, Mrs. Thatcher. Mrs. Thatcher wanted to roll back the power of the state. And to her, the professional elites, the civil servants, lawyers, doctors, the broadcasters, were all terrible hypocrites. They talked loudly of public duty, but secretly they were running things in their own interests. So she spent the 80s attacking these groups as a threat to Britain. Helped by Rupert Murdoch, who detested elitism in Britain and America.
They hate to see someone communicating with the masses. They feel that newspapers, the written word, is not for the masses. That should be left to television, or perhaps to nobody. But there's a great sort of elitism.
But then, in the 1990s, the journalists became even more like Richard Nixon. Like him, they started to see hidden enemies everywhere. They were enthusiastically supported in this by some members of the middle-class elites. Doctors, psychiatrists and academics, who reinvented themselves as experts, who said that they too could identify dangers lurking just under the surface of our everyday lives that we couldn't see. Experts uncovered hidden threats like sexual abuse, paedophilia, and even networks of satanic abuse on a vast scale.
Doctor believes that many multiple personality patients were sexually abused by satanic cults.